Since September, we have conducted 3 back-to-back trials to tell the full story of what happened on August 24th, 2019, when Aurora officers violently restrained Elijah McCLAIN on the ground and paramedics injected him with a deadly dose of ketamine. These trials occurred after a state grand jury, with a considerable amount of deliberation and testimony, found probable cause to charge the officers and paramedics with the death of Elijah McCLAIN. And the court ruled there was sufficient evidence to go forward to support the charges and to hold a criminal trial. We knew that these cases were going to be difficult to prosecute. We are satisfied with today's verdict, and we remain confident that bringing these cases forward was the right thing to do for justice, for Elijah McCLAIN, and for healing in the Aurora community. And Elijah McCLAIN's memory will live on as a blessing. The work of this hard-working team put together a very strong case based on the evidence and the law against the paramedics. The prosecution team in the 3 trials brought to light the evidence that occurred that dark night. The world, Elijah, and especially his mom, Janine McCLAIN, deserve to have the full story told. That's what justice demanded. Elijah did nothing wrong. His life mattered. He should be with us here today. Accountability does not end with these trials. Too often when we've seen people die at the hands of law enforcement officers because of situations that got escalated unnecessarily and never should have used force. That's a call on us to continue this work, for Elijah's memory to continue as a blessing. This work is core to what we do in our department, improving policing, improving emergency response, and working hard to build trust between law enforcement, first responders, and the community they're sworn to protect. We all must do what we can to prevent these tragedies. Thank you.
You're hovering. Wondering if you...
Yeah.
You go.
Okay.
You go.
This story is Janine McCLAIN's story, and it's Elijah McCLAIN's story. I can only represent an echo of her story and his story. But what I will say, when something happens to one of us, it happens to all of us. I watched as the prosecution delivered the truth about what happened to Elijah in 2019. The truth is now real, and it is available for the people. I heard every side of this say that Elijah should still be with us. Elijah still being here with his mother is justice. God made a promise to all of us when he made Elijah. This young man had a spirit that was sweeter than any of us can ever even try to be. Self-taught violinist, self-taught guitarist, and upon his murder, he was mastering the oboe. He was called to be a healer. So he went into massage therapy. And from what I understand, some of the Aurora police officers were actually some of his clients. He was called to be a healer. Randy Rodema, Jason Rosenblatt, Jeremy Cooper, Nathan Woodyard, Peter Chikuniak denied all of us the promise that God made to us when he made Elijah. They denied that promise to us. And the Attorney General said that the truth was told, this story was told, but there is a part of this story that we'll never know. We'll never know Elijah as the father. We'll never know Elijah as the husband. We don't get that story. So we are still seeking justice. The algorithm of justice are charges, arrest, conviction, and sentencing. Thankfully, in this case, the algorithm continues, but we do not know justice until we see sentencing. So Judge Warner, you now have a responsibility. We are still seeking justice. And as this truth was told to the people, you have a part of this story that now you have to finish. Will there be justice? Elijah is gone, but he is never forgotten. He has left a legacy for me, for you, for everyone. And for those that are not able to see that an injustice was done, my heart hurts for you, because an injustice was done. And if you are disrupted by the justice that has been now, that by the result of this trial, if you are disrupted by that, I will just say that I love you more than you hate yourself. Because a loss of life in this way should disrupt all of us. And as adamant as Shanine McClain is for justice for her son, you should share in that sentiment with her. You are invited to share in that sentiment with her. His name was and always will be Elijah McClain. We love you, Elijah McClain.
Ma'am, there were many supporters of the defendants outside the courtroom as you guys walked out and you held your fists up high. What did that mean?
That fist was not held for anyone except for Elijah. So that fist was representative that we love you, Elijah McClain. We see you, Elijah McClain. We will always and forever call the name Elijah McClain.
Just very quickly, on behalf of the Aurora branch of the NAACP, we want to thank the Attorney General's office and Phil Weiser for taking these cases on, giving Elijah McClain a chance to have a voice in his time in court so that the story could come out. And so on behalf of the Aurora branch of the NAACP, we thank the Attorney General's office. And as we have always done, we stand with Shanine McClain to continue not just to have justice in the courtroom, but to reform public safety in the city of Aurora and nationwide. Thank you.
Is this justice for you?
You know, as it was stated earlier, justice is Elijah McClain being alive. That's justice. Right now, we're part of a process of accountability for what should have been justice. So right now, we're still going through this process. It's the courtroom process and also continuing the reform that needs to take place so that there's never another incident, another murder like we've seen and witnessed with Elijah McClain.
What is a just sentence in your mind?
Excuse me?
What is a just sentence in your mind?
I don't want to get into sentencing or things of this nature. March 1st is the sentencing date, and we'll find out what happens then.
Okay, if you said the judge had a job to do, what would satisfy you?
When I walk into that courtroom, I don't walk into the courtroom with hope. I will not let the criminal legal system continue to strip me of my hope. I hold expectancy. The responsibility that the judge has is to look at the law and ensure that the sentencing matches the punishment. the deliberation that he needs to go through. I wish him through it with diligence, with humanity, with honor. And this is now his legacy that he will be able to inscribe in history. So my expectancy is that we have a judge that represents humanity and that represents the laws that are supposed to be designed to protect all of us. That is my expectancy.
You have one of the words in your mouth, an expectation of possibly being disappointed? I don't want to put words in your mouth.
I'm a woman of faith, so I'll always hold faith, but I don't put my faith in the people. So with that being said, again, I will sit with expectancy that this is done the right way. I don't want to be disappointed. Shani McClain. Oh, she's ready to go. Thank you all. Thank you all for the platform, for the opportunity. Never forget his name, Elijah McClain.
Feels like it was generated.
The first responders in Colorado who administered ketamine to Elijah McClain before he died during his 2019 arrest have been found guilty by a jury in Aurora. Now, Jeremy Cooper and Peter Sikchunik have been found responsible for his fatal overdose. So this was a story that we've been covering since 2020. In fact, the story got very little media attention since it happened in 2019, but the protests that were carried out in the summer of 2020 drew attention to it. So as a reminder, here are the events of what happened the day that Elijah McClain was killed. Now, 23-year-old Elijah McClain was stopped by police officers in Aurora, Colorado on August 24th of 2019 after someone had called in and alerted the authorities about a suspicious looking person in the neighborhood. Now, the reason why the caller felt that McClain looked suspicious was because he was wearing a ski mask, but it turns out that McClain was wearing that ski mask because he had a medical issue, a circulation problem that made him feel extremely cold. So his face would get cold and he wore that mask in order to stay warm. The caller also shared concern that McClain was waving his hands as he listened to earbuds. Maybe he was enjoying the music. I mean, I don't know why that looks suspicious, but the caller also noted that to the authorities. As officers sought to detain McClain, he protested that he wanted to be left alone. For good reason, he hadn't done anything wrong. He couldn't understand why cops were stopping him. One officer claimed that McClain reached for his gun, prompting another to apply a chokehold on the young man within a minute of their encounter. The officer was convicted of homicide and third-degree assault earlier this year, while 2 officers were acquitted and 1 is back working on the Aurora Police Department. Now, that was what the police officers had carried out. But the second half of this interaction with McClain had to do with the first responders who arrived to the scene, because they had administered, what the prosecutors called lethal dose of ketamine, and that is what ultimately ended McClain's life. Medical responders arrived about 15 minutes later, and paramedics injected him with the ketamine, which is a very powerful sedative. It's actually used on horses, for instance. Now, McClain went into cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital, and he died a few days later. According to prosecutors, the paramedics failed to perform essential medical assessments on McClain, neglecting basic checks like taking his pulse before administering the ketamine. Experts testified that the dosage was excessive for someone of McClain's size. He was only 140 pounds. Additionally, prosecutors assert that the paramedics did not monitor McClain promptly after administering the sedative. Instead, they left him on the ground, exacerbating difficulties in breathing. The almost 4-week-long trial is the last of all the trials seeking to bring justice to McClain and his family. The jury found the paramedics guilty of criminally negligent homicide. Both medical professionals were also charged with assault. Sikchunik was found guilty of one of the assault charges, second-degree assault, for the unlawful administration of drugs, while Cooper was not found guilty of the assault charges. The two paramedics who have not been sentenced yet could spend years behind bars. We don't know what their sentences are yet. The hearing for that will happen later. The city of Aurora, though, has said that the two have been fired following their convictions. So, John, I wanted to ask you what you think about this. I thought that administering the ketamine, especially after the chokehold, and just leaving him there to suffer and have difficulty breathing was an injustice, and the jury feels the same way. Now, paramedics are concerned, and some local authorities in Aurora, Colorado are concerned that this sets a terrible precedent for paramedics, because now they might be afraid to administer sedatives in cases where they typically would feel it's justified to do so. What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe they should be more concerned about willy-nilly administering overdoses of sedatives. I mean, and if they're worried about pressure from the cops or something, provide them with legal protections from pressure from the cops. I could definitely see doing that, but I mean, I think the immediate problem, the longstanding historic problem, is a lack of concern for the inherent value of certain members of certain groups' lives, including especially young black men. That's the longstanding problem that definitely has not received the attention it deserves. If it turns out that the paramedic thing becomes a problem, we can address it. But we've got only hundreds of years of history of law enforcement not giving a damn about whether people like Elijah McClain live or die. That I feel like is the more pressing issue. This entire case, and I'd honestly forgotten about this for the past 2 years or whatever, even though there have been some updates. It feels like it was generated by ChatGPT to include every way that people are failed, like young black men like him are failed. In that the behaviors of wearing a ski mask and moving while listening to music, those are descriptions that are used to imply that he was being erratic or suspicious or something that only apply to people like him. Any random person doing that would not be considered to be a lethal threat. He's 140 pounds. You couldn't just hold him down.
Right. There were multiple officers on the scene.
Multiple officers, and then also generally the way that they justify lethal force. In this case, I know that it took a while for the drugs to kill him, but usually is he has some sort of weapon or he has something in his hand, so it seems like a weapon. But they also have the backup of, well, if he doesn't have a weapon, I have a weapon. And his hand is near my weapon.
Exactly, that's the,
so now.
Yeah.
Well, here's a way.
Claim they always make.
If you're really worried about someone grabbing your gun and shooting you, a great way to avoid that is to not have a lethal weapon on your body. And then there's nothing for a person to grab, as if the 140-pound kid is gonna get it out of your holster and turn it on you against multiple cops. Don't have the lethal weapon, and it can't be turned on you. And so just every step of the way, it's like their diagnosis of him as having superhuman strength. He's 140 pounds.
Yeah, look, the cops need to have a lethal weapon in a country that's swimming with guns, in a country that has all sorts of criminals that are heavily armed, right? I get why cops need to have the weapon. However, this is what I would say. I don't begrudge anyone who sees an individual with a ski mask and feels a little concerned, because when you see someone wearing a ski mask, what is that usually associated with, right? However, it is the job of the authorities to just ask some questions before escalating the situation. I think that's where things started to go wrong. The cops show up, and it's almost as if they automatically assumed that Elijah McClain was engaged in something criminal. Elijah McClain, prior to that interaction with the authorities, was in a convenience store, literally paying for whatever he was buying at the convenience store. We have footage of him, surveillance footage of him at that convenience store. Obviously, he didn't do anything wrong, because if he were some sort of robber or burglar, typically these are the types of people who wear the ski masks, he wouldn't be paying for items at the convenience store. So my point in mentioning all of that is, it is the job of the authorities to ask questions and actually investigate the claims or concerns made by the caller to determine whether Elijah McClain or the person who's been called about is a danger or is engaging in any criminality. There was no evidence of that whatsoever. The only thing was that he was wearing a ski mask. That is not enough to justify escalating the situation to the point where you put a 140-pound guy in a chokehold and then administer a super strong sedative, ketamine, in order to sedate him.
Yeah.
And then leave him on the ground without providing the proper care to ensure he doesn't die of an overdose as a result of that ketamine being administered into his, incredibly light body. 140 pounds is nothing.
Yeah, he's a kid.
Anyway, look, I don't mean to drudge up like the injustices that happened, leading up to his death, because in reality, we should at least celebrate the fact that there was some justice in this case. There are far too many stories involving, an innocent person getting killed by the authorities, and then there's no justice. And we're starting to see a little bit of a shift in the way that our justice system handles cases like this. And I think it's a good thing. And to your point earlier, John, I agree with you. I think the paramedics should hesitate before they administer powerful sedatives like this. They should do the proper, questioning prior to doing what the paramedics did in this case. You want to help save lives. And I'm sure most paramedics feel that way. And so if this is going to cause some to maybe question whether they're gonna administer a sedative or carry out some certain action, good. I think that's what the point of this outcome is.
I am super excited to talk about Tailwind Ghostwriter. The affiliate link is in my description below. And yes, I've been compensated to actually make this video.
We, the jury, find the defendant Jeremy Cooper guilty of criminally negligent homicide with the signature of the foreperson. We, the jury, find the defendant Peter Chikuniak guilty of criminally negligent homicide, again with the signature of the foreperson. We, the jury, find the defendant Peter Chikuniak guilty of assault in the second degree, unlawful administration of drugs with a signature line with the foreperson. Beneath that, we further find with respect to the verdict question for this count as follows. Did the defendant and/or the principal cause bodily injury or death? The box is checked yes with the signature of the foreperson.
We are following breaking news as